All right, welcome back, guys. We're doing more cardiovascular system content. Now, in regards to cardiovascular system, let's see where we left off. We were talking about the great vessels. The big thing regarding the great vessels is we should know where they are. Obviously, that's stuff that we're going to practice a little bit more today, actually, and know a little bit about what they do as far as what they're involved with. There's more than just 4 of these vessels, but those are the 4 that we're going to be prioritizing. Now, I actually just recently added this slide, so we do need to talk about this just a bit. As far as, let me see if I can pull this up. There we go. As far as the heart sounds are concerned, we talked about this in the last video a little bit, lub and dub. Those are the 2 sounds that we hear when the heart beats. More traditionally we hear it as dun 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 dun, but it's lub, dub. Now, lub and dub are the sounds that we hear using any tool like a stethoscope, right? Lub is going to be, the thing I wanted to add to this is that lub is going to be the sound that's made when the AV valves shut. So when the AV valves shut, that's when we're going to create that lub sound. And the dub sound is going to be when the semilunar valves shut. So interestingly enough, these valves actually open and close on both sides simultaneously. So the AV valves shut at the same time. And then the semilunar valves, which are found closer to the middle, shut at the same time as well. And that causes the lub, which the following sound would then be a dub. Okay. All right. So we're going to do a little bit of review here. And by review, I mean like we're going to learn a little bit more about the structure of the heart, like anatomy. So we need to understand the anatomical structure a bit more. So I'm going to do my best here to flip this over like so. You may not be able to see my camera, but that's okay because I'm going to need the tools of my computer a little bit more here. So I'm actually going to drag this over here for now. So what we see here is a heart, right? Now there's a number of structures we need to label in the heart. So let's go ahead and start doing that while we can. Let me make sure that I'm going to hide this temporarily actually. I should have the ability to change colors pretty clearly. Let me see. Might just be here. That's the background. Toolbar. Either way, we'll figure it out. All right. So first, we're going to label a couple things. Let's go ahead and label the chambers, right? Because the chambers, we learned about that a couple videos ago. So we already discussed that anyway. So we're going to have 4 chambers. We're going to have the right atrium. We're going to have the right ventricle. We're going to have the left atrium. And then we're going to have the left ventricle. I'm just going to shorthand so that we can quickly identify some stuff. Well, after identifying the atriums and the ventricles, or the atria and the ventricles, we can then start to identify some of the valves. So we got to learn some of the valves as well. Now, regarding the valves, let me see if I can pull up more colors. I swear there should be other colors in this. I know there's this rainbow and galaxy pen. If not, we can manage. We'll just work around this anyway. Okay, well, it is what it is. All right. So let's go ahead and use blue in this case to identify this particular valve. So we're going to color this one right here blue. And that valve is going to be, and I'm going to do like a little, whatchamacallit? A key. That's the word I was looking for. So I'm going to have like a little key on the side here. So in blue, we're going to indicate that this is one of the AV valves, and more specifically, that is known as the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve. And why do I know that's tricuspid? Because it separates the right atrium from the right ventricle. Okay. In green, go ahead and use, oh, wait a second. I think I figured it out. There it is. There's the other colors that we need. Okay. Yeah, we'll keep it with green. All right. In green, we're going to have this right here. This is our next little valve that we're just going to color in. So in green, I'm going to do it my little key over here this time. In green, that's going to be our bicuspid valve. Remember, bicuspid is also known as the mitral valve. That is another name that we have for it. We have two more valves, and you don't really see them as well, but I'll kind of make sure to color them in. The semilunar valves, in my opinion, they're easier to label. They're easier to see once we've identified the great vessels. So let's continue identifying some great vessels, shall we? Just cleaning this off a little bit. It's a little dirty. Okay. All right. Next, we have a large vessel that actually goes from this direction all the way around and then loops back down this way. So it's a rather complex vessel, right? So what is this vessel doing? Let's talk about this. It's the largest artery of the human body. So we talked about this in the last video. So this is actually going to be the aorta. So that's going to be the aorta. Now, that's one of the largest arteries, as we mentioned, right? We also have some pretty major veins that we should identify too. So I'm going to actually shorthand this to SVC, and I'm going to shorthand this to IVC. SVC is going to stand for superior vena cava. IVC is going to stand for inferior vena cava. The vena cavas are the main veins. These are the veins that are going to bring in blood towards the body. The superior vena cava just brings in blood from the upper half of the body. The inferior vena cava is just going to bring in blood from the lower half of the body. I like to think of the vena cava as like a highway system. Your highway system or your highways are going to have a lot of roads or a lot of traffic and a lot of cars and a lot of lanes, right? Well, as you get off the highway, then you get onto more like state roads, and then eventually you get into more smaller local roads, and then eventually you're like in a neighborhood, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. That's what we see with the veins and the arteries and the vessels in general. The closer you are to the heart, the larger we expect it to be. Okay. Next, let's talk about this major vessel right here. So let's go ahead and use a new color. Let's go ahead and convert this blue pen into maybe a purple. So in purple, we're going to go ahead and indicate that all of this right here, this is a new vessel going outward. This is a new vessel going outward towards the lungs. Now, because it's going toward the lungs, there's a special name that we call it. So we actually call this the pulmonary arteries. The pulmonary arteries. All right, sounds good. Let's get a new color. Let's go with teal. Now, from the lungs, the blood needs to return back to the heart. So it's actually going to return back to the heart via these four small vessels. That's what we see here. So these four small vessels, we can do our little color code over here. We know that it's returning to the heart from the lungs. So of course it's going to be pulmonary. And this is going to be your veins. Pulmonary veins. Last but not least, we have two structures left to identify. So I'm actually going to use this rainbow pen and this galaxy pen to identify this. The semilunar valves. The semilunar valves, in my opinion, are easiest to identify once you've recognized the vessels. So let's look at this valve right here. So I'm going to actually draw in black little valves popping out just so we know what we're talking about, because you don't really see it in this diagram as clearly. So let's say we're focusing on this little valve right here. So I'm going to use this brightly colored rainbow pen to indicate that that's the valve found right next to the pulmonary arteries. So if this rainbow color, it's a nice little feature. If this rainbow color is indicative of this area, which is right before the pulmonary arteries, then we call this valve the pulmonary semilunar valve. All right. Now let's use the black pen again to kind of draw a little bit on this side here. We're going to just add little flaps right here and here. Again, you don't really see it that clearly in this picture, so I'm just adding it in. So on the other side, you have these valves that are connected directly to this massive artery called the aorta. So we're going to use this galaxy pen. Right? Now let's make our little code over here, our color code. That's a nice little color. So in regards to this galaxy color, what is that going to be referencing? Well, just see the artery it's connected to. See the vessel it's connected to. It's connected to the aorta. So we actually call this the aortic semilunar valve. Okay? So this is a great review. I'm going to pull myself up a little bit. This is a great review of the structures of the heart that we need to know. These are the structures of the heart that we need to be comfortable with. Our Quizlet goes over this really, really effectively as well. So we really need to make sure we're comfortable with this, no doubt about it. All right. Now let me go ahead and pull up a new picture of the heart. There we go. Same thing that we saw before, right? It's just the heart, nothing crazy. But we're going to draw something else this time. We're going to use a different diagram. So here's what I'm going to do. I actually need one more whiteboard. So let me create a new whiteboard for us. There we are. So on this blank whiteboard, we're just going to be writing stuff down. So what's this whiteboard going to be for? Well, this whiteboard is going to be for the path of blood. That's what this whiteboard's for. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to need some normal colors. Let's go with blue. Number 1. So let's pull it back. Let's go back to that heart diagram, the blank heart at least. So let's first create a quick color code for us, right? I like my color codes. I think they're effective. In blue, we'll do it down here. In blue, we're going to be using blue to identify deoxygenated blood, or blood that has low levels of oxygen. In medical textbooks and in medical diagrams, deoxygenated blood is almost always going to be shown in blue. In red, we're going to use red to identify high levels of blood, or oxygenated blood, as we call it. So first, we need to just get that out of the way. Now, when it comes down to the path of blood, I think it's easiest to learn the path of blood with the right side of the heart first. So learning this side of the heart first, because remember, it's the left side of the picture, but it's the right side because you got to mirror image it. So the very first step for me, I like to start by focusing on these vessels that are bringing in blood to the heart. So let's go back to the steps, the path of blood that we're writing out. So step 1, simply put, that's going to be your superior and inferior vena cava. Remember, the vena cavas are the main veins, as we call them. So that's step 1. Let's move it back, bring it back to here. Step 2, all that blood from the superior and inferior vena cava is actually going to drop right in here, and it comes from here to that little circle. And it's going to start to fill this receiving chamber, as we call it. So it's going to start to fill this receiving chamber up with blood. So what is step 2? Step 2 is going to be the right atrium. Oh, sorry. Got a little carried away with the M. The right atrium. All right, step 3. Let's bring it back to where we were. All that blood in the right atrium is then going to start to drip into this larger chamber, and it's going to start to fill this larger chamber with blood. So what is this larger chamber called? The right ventricle. All right, sounds good. Step 4. The right ventricle is going to pump. When the right ventricle pumps, it actually shoots blood in 2 directions simultaneously. So it's going to shoot blood in 2 directions simultaneously, towards the left of the heart and towards the right of the heart. So where is the blood going? The blood goes towards the pulmonary arteries. So the blood's going towards the pulmonary arteries. Now, some interesting stuff happens. Step 5. In regards to step 5, the blood coming from the pulmonary arteries obviously needs to go somewhere, right? I'm going to pull this over here for now. The blood coming from the pulmonary arteries needs to go somewhere. So it's actually going to go towards, let's just use a different color for now. We can use orange. So the blood from the pulmonary arteries is going to go towards the lungs. That's supposed to be the lungs. Let me see if I can. Nope. That's better. Towards the lungs. So all that deoxygenated blood is now entering the lungs. That's what we observe. So if we go back, we now have our next step. It's entering the lungs. And notice, look how I'm going to write out lungs. There's a reason why I wrote it in 2 colors, because of what's actually happening in the lungs. Stuff we've learned in respiratory system. In the lungs, you are having gas exchange. You're having a ton of this you have a ton of this high carbon dioxide rich blood or low oxygen blood. We call that deoxygenated blood. But you also have a lot of this oxygen rich blood. So you have a lot of this oxygenated blood in the lungs because of gas exchange. And you also have a lot of this deoxygenated blood because you're trying to get rid of all of this carbon dioxide. Now, for the first time ever in these steps that we're learning, you now have oxygen-rich blood exiting the lungs. So you now have oxygen-rich blood, and it's going to actually enter into these 4 specific vessels. Right? And so what's our next step? Step 6. It's going to be pulmonary veins. And I'm going to put a number 4 next to it just so we know that it's 4 of them. Step 7. All of that blood from the pulmonary veins needs to enter somewhere, and you actually see the little holes in which they come from. So all that blood is going to enter in here, and it's going to start to fill this particular chamber with blood. So what do we call that chamber? The pulmonary, not pulmonary. We call that chamber the left atrium. Couple steps left. Step 8. From the left atrium, the blood is going to drip downward and fill in this large cavity, or this discharging chamber, as we call it. So the discharging chamber is also known as the left ventricle. Okay. Last but not least, step 9. We go back to the path of blood. The blood is going to be squeezed from the left side, and it's going to send the blood in this direction, and it's going to travel in all of these directions simultaneously. And what is this step that we see? That is going to be the aorta. The aorta. So these are the 9 steps of blood, or the 9 pathways of blood, if you want to call it that. So they go one by one, right? I always like to start with the deoxygenated blood, because in my opinion, it's just easier to start that way. But you have the superior and inferior vena cava making through the atrium and the ventricle on the right side into the pulmonary arteries, interacting with the lungs. The pulmonary veins are then going to return the blood back to the heart, left atrium, left ventricle, and then finally shoot all that oxygen-rich blood into the rest of the body via the aorta. And that's kind of what we see happening here. All of this is rather complex, right? It looks like a lot of craziness happening, but you can understand that it's just a consistent, every time the heart beats, you have this consistent action of sending deoxygenated blood to the lungs and sending oxygenated blood back towards the heart, and then sending it to the rest of the body. Okay. All right. Awesome. Let's go ahead and go back to where we were as far as our material is concerned. Let me see if I can fix some of this for us. There's that. Okay. And then bingo. Good to go. All right. And finally, to finish up this video, we're going to talk a little bit about coronary circulation. In regards to coronary circulation, it's not too terribly difficult, but it's a unique phenomenon occurring. The blood in the heart does not interact directly with the heart. So what I mean by that is, like, imagine like it's like you're not double dipping. The heart obviously is a pump, and it's going to send blood to the rest of the body. And we know that blood is necessary for every single organ to survive. We should know that based off of our circulatory concepts. That said, the blood that's inside the heart actually doesn't use that blood immediately. So what ends up happening is that the heart has its own circulatory system. It uses arteries and veins, coronary arteries, cardiac veins, to do what it needs to do. So the idea here is that when the left ventricle squeezes, that blood is going to enter the aorta. Some of that blood from the aorta is going to do like a U-turn, and it's going to go back to the heart via the coronary arteries. These arteries and veins are found literally on top of the heart. So the coronary arteries are then going to feed the heart and keep the heart living, right? You need to keep the tissue surviving. Then when you have the blood that has a lot of waste product and carbon dioxide, it's going to go through the cardiac veins, which is also on top of the heart, and then empty all that blood right back into the heart, specifically into the right atrium, via the coronary sinus. The coronary sinus are structures found on the top parts of the heart. They're like a back door or like a secret hatch. Basically, it's like another access way for the blood to go directly into the right atrium, because the right atrium is going to be the part of the heart that collects nothing but deoxygenated blood. All right. So very good. There's a lot that we covered today, no doubt about it, and a lot of diagram related stuff. So we do have to be comfortable with that. But I think we did a great job today, guys. All right. So I think that's where we're going to conclude. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one.